And this brings us to that controversial verse of verse 19. You will say to me then, why does God still find fault? Who can resist his will? Who can resist God's will? This is where we read earlier. They said, God says, just shut up and listen to me. See, the problem is the Calvinist assumes that he's talking about a believer in free will. God is against people who believe in free will, they say. I shouldn't be held responsible for my hardening because the choice was made for me before I was born. They think that's the person Paul's debating. Here's what I'd like to argue. Paul's debating a first-century Jew. Paul is debating the person who says, I shouldn't be held responsible for my hardening. After all, it led to mercy for the Gentiles. That's the person who's arguing against Paul. And Paul's point is, no, you have been a vessel of wrath that God has been patient with for a very long time. He's been giving you mercy throughout your whole history. You've always been a stubborn and stiff-necked people. You've always resisted God's grace, and I've been faithful to you time and time again. But the good news is I was being patient with you because I knew if I hardened you at this moment of history, not only would you be saved, but all mankind could be saved through your disobedience. But it's still your fault. It's still your fault. Now, how do we know this is correct? Well, this is kind of Paul's point throughout all of Romans. This is who he's debating throughout the entire book of Romans. Paul's having this ongoing debate with this sort of figment of his imagination, this first-century Jew. Look at some of these other arguments. Romans 3. If our unrighteousness, they said, this is the man debating, okay? He's like, if our unrighteousness serves to show the righteousness of God, what shall we say? God's unrighteous to inflict wrath on us? God can't get mad at us because it shows how good he is. Paul says, no, by no means. A few verses later. If through my lie God's truth abounds to his glory, why am I being condemned as a sinner? I'm going to do evil so God might do good to me. And Paul says, if you talk this way, your condemnation is just. Okay? You're still responsible for your sin, even if God uses your sin for a glorious thing. You still have sin, Paul says.